So Buddhism is sometimes called the Middle Way. What did that mean? We'll look at it in the context of early Buddhism, coming right up. So I'm Doug Smith. I'm study director at the Secular Buddhist Association. That's secularbuddhism.org. If you're new to the channel and interested in living a wiser and a kinder and a less stress-filled life, consider subscribing. So one of the ways that people talk about living a wiser and a kinder and a less stress-filled life is to sort of live a life in the middle, a middle way kind of life, in between the extremes of one thing or another. But what exactly did that mean in the context of early Buddhism? Because it's something, in fact, quite specific, and I think even within the context of early Buddhism, it changed, arguably maybe throughout the Buddha's lifetime, or soon after he died. It's not entirely clear. But basically, in the Buddha's, what's called his first sermon, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, which supposedly is the sermon he gave just after attaining awakening, he discusses the middle way. And in particular, he discusses it as a middle way between extreme asceticism and indulgence, or sense indulgence, indulgence in sense pleasures. And I have a recent video where I discuss what the Buddha considered the dangers of sense pleasures, the dangers of us getting attached to things in the world, of expecting them not to change, and of therefore having sense pleasures almost directly lead to pain and suffering on our own part, psychologically. And this kind of pain that comes from sensory indulgence is what we find typically within householders with a normal lay life. It's what we found in the Buddha's time also among the brahmins, the Brahminic group, who seemed to pursue sense pleasures in certain respects, and they were often portrayed as being wealthy and somewhat arrogant within the Pāli Canon. But there's also another problem, another potential problem, which is asceticism. That's the other side of the coin. And of course, just before the Buddha attained awakening, he went through a number of ascetic practices, starving himself half to death or almost to death, of doing different kinds of breath practices where you hold your breath, or you do various kinds of things that cause you physical pain in order to overcome some of the bad karma that you have. And that's a viewpoint that's typified by the philosophy or early religion called Jainism, which existed a little before the Buddha was born, and seems to have been one of the sort of philosophies that he reacted against. And in one sutta, the Chula-dukkha-khanda Sutta, the Buddha talks with a Jain, and a Jain says basically that they believe that you're supposed to achieve pleasure through pain. The pleasure that you're supposed to obtain is the pleasure of having extinguished some of this karmic baggage that you carry, some of these bad karma that you carry, that can lead to a bad rebirth or to bad things happening to you in the future. And so that kind of pleasure of extinguishing that karmic baggage is only achieved through pain in their viewpoint. So you had to undergo certain kinds of ascetic practices, even almost to the point of kind of a self-torture. And the Buddha viewed these kinds of practices as being self-destructive, as being another form of clinging, almost clinging to non-existence or clinging to death in some sense, and that they were not really helpful in the path towards awakening. And in particular, when talking to these Jains, the Buddha said that he had found a path where you could get pleasure through pleasure, at least in certain circumstances. And in particular, he talked about the pleasures of meditation, or what we call jhana, which is a focused kind of deep meditation where we concentrate and become absorbed into some particular object of meditation. And when we're in that kind of jhana, we feel pleasure. And the Buddha talks about the fact that the pleasure that he feels in jhana, he found a wholesome form of pleasure. It's the only really wholesome form of pleasure. For the Buddha, pleasures of the senses, sense pleasures, which is what we normally find pleasure in, are unwholesome forms of pleasure. They promote clinging in particular, clinging to objects in the world. Whereas for the Buddha, jhanic pleasure was wholesome. So it was a way that we could actually achieve pleasure through pleasure. And so as a result, if pleasure is the aim in a certain sense, I mean, this is the argument, at least at this point, if pleasure is the aim, then we don't need to pursue ascetic practices in order to gain it. And of course, it's also the case that awakening is more than simply the search for pleasure, although for the Buddha, the awakening was sort of the supreme form of pleasure. So probably in the earliest texts, For the Buddha, the middle way was a middle way between asceticism and indulgence and sense pleasure. In another text, the Buddha also talks about the middle way being a middle way between indulgence and sense pleasure and clinging to rules and rituals, or rites and rituals. So we could understand somebody who was, let's say, a monastic, who is, let's say, opposed to sense pleasures, who doesn't really want sense pleasures in that sense, understands the dangers in them, but on the other hand clings to rules and rituals, clings to the rules, the monastic rules of the order, or clings to ideas of certain kinds of ethical practices, that one is supposed to do this and only this. And that can be its own kind of problem, because we have to understand that there's sort of a middle path between those two, because rules and rituals can become their own form of asceticism, of penance, if you like, of something that we undertake almost grimly, in order to feel that we are superior in some sense. And of course, that is another extreme that we should shun. And so these are, I think, the ways of understanding the middle way that are very sort of down to earth. They're very sort of in a day-to-day level. But there are also more philosophical ways of interpreting this that the Buddha also discussed. One of the most famous, probably the most famous, is in the Kaccayanagotta Sutta, where the Buddha discusses the middle way as a middle way between existence and non-existence. Some people may assert the existence of all things, that is to say that, let's say, all things exist just as we see them, that we seem to see tables and chairs and chariots and people, persons, and one person might say they all exist, they're all real, just the way they seem to me. On the other hand, you may have people who are nihilists, who say nothing exists. It's all simply an illusion and nothing more. And for the Buddha, both of these were also extremes of a kind of a philosophical character or a metaphysical character. And for the Buddha, the middle way between these two extremes was to be understood as dependent origination, the laws of dependent origination. That is to say that all that exists in the world exists dependent upon causes and conditions, persists only for short periods of time, and then decays away, while other things replace them, because those other things then have come up with their own causes and conditions. And this Kaccayanagotta Sutta may be the single most important sutta in the later development of what's called the Madhyāmaka School, or the Middle Way school, if you like, the middling school, which we find in Mahayana Buddhism. This is a school that was founded by Nagarjuna, the great Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna, and in his most famous piece, the Mula Madhyāmaka Karika, the only text that he cites from the Pāli Canon, or the early Buddhist canon, is this Kaccayanagotta Sutta. This idea that there is a middle way between existence and non-existence, and that middle way is understood as a dependent origination. And in another sutta, the Buddha discusses the middle way as a middle way between unity and plurality. And the notion that all things are one, which is the notion of unity, that all things are one, is something we find in Brahminic teachings, in particular teachings in some of the Upanishads, where you have the idea of Brahman being this kind of godlike figure who is identical to the universe. And the point of practice is to understand our unity with this Brahman, that our Atman, our soul, our self, is unified with Brahman. And that's an idea of unity. And also, of course, we may have people who assert the existence, the absolute existence of a plurality of things. Let's say in Jainism, for example, the idea that each individual soul is its own individual thing. And so we have these eternally or everlastingly existing things in the universe. And these are two opposing views. And again, the Buddha saw them as extremes, and himself as putting in the middle between them, as asserting, again, the existence of things due to causes and conditions, following the laws of dependent origination, among other things. So we see that the middle way in Buddhism has a number of different related meanings. In the first place, it has to do with practice, that we're supposed to avoid sense pleasures, and we're also supposed to avoid extreme asceticism, instead finding a middle way between those. It also has a more, I would say, sophisticated philosophical interpretation, where we're supposed to avoid certain extremes of ontology or metaphysics. And I think the upshot for us, if we're trying to live a wiser and a kinder and a less stress-filled life, is to understand both senses of this. I think that the first sense, the earlier sense, if you like, is probably going to be more useful to us on a day-to-day basis, to avoid these kinds of extremes of behavior. but also we can understand extremes of kind of philosophical interpretation, perhaps grasping at things, and so believing that things are existing in some final sense, in some ultimate sense that makes them worth grasping at and worth holding to, a notion that we ourselves exist forever, and so we should grasp on our own ego and our own continued existence forever. Those kinds of things are also important to keep in mind. I think nearly everybody sees their own view as a middle between extremes. So no matter where you are in any of these spectra, whether you happen to be a follower of Jainism or a follower of Brahmanism or a follower of Christianity or whatever it happens to be, you're going to see yourself as a middle between extremes. And so to that extent, I think the whole idea of a middle way is more of a rhetorical kind of a move than a philosophical one. In other words, what the Buddha is doing by describing his philosophy as a middle way philosophy is basically making it seem better in comparison to other views. But given that everybody is liable to say themselves as in the middle, I mean, for example, Aristotle famously described his ethics as looking for a middle between extremes. So, for example, courage, which is one of the Aristotelian virtues, is a middle between cowardice on the one hand and being overly rash on the other. But we shouldn't think necessarily that just because something's in the middle that it's better. There's even a kind of a fallacy of the middle where, somebody argues that we should believe their view because it's a middle between extremes. Well, sometimes the middle view isn't actually the correct one. I mean, after all, we can think of a view where somebody says, well, there's one extreme which is truth and one extreme which is falsity, so I'm here in the middle. Well, that's obviously not going to be a very useful view. So we have to take it with a grain of salt, I think. But nevertheless, it is a very, very important part of Buddhism and a very important part of the way early Buddhism views itself as this kind of middle view. And it's so important that it then became structured in later Buddhism, in the Madhyāmaka School, as part of the name of the school. So thanks so much for being here. If you're interested in helping support the channel and getting more kind of views about what's going on other kinds of media that I sometimes post on, check out my Patreon page. I've linked it down below. So glad to have you here. Thanks so much for your kind comments and questions, and we'll catch you on the next one of these videos.